This video is sponsored by Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus. If you know your 40k meme history, you'll be very familiar with the Reasonable Marines, a joke on the 40k Space Marines where instead of painting themselves blue and charging into close combat to fight their giant alien abomination opponents with a sword, they would instead use things like camouflage, subterfuge, and actual intelligence and battle plans to win the day. The Reasonable Marines are a fun inside joke amongst 40k fans to poke fun at how unreasonable regular Space Marines are. Although that's not quite true. The Reasonable Marines do kind of exist in 40k, and they're the Raptors chapter. I've actually painted up a gaggle of Raptors Space Marines. I put this little kill team together for OG Kill Team, back in the day when Kill Team was more of a 40k warcry than its own bespoke game system. I wanted to play around with some more reasonable, competent Space Marines, and this is what I came up with. Although there is something fun about the over-the-top ridiculousness of typical Space Marines, there is something cool about Tactical as well, and I think I'm ready to give the Raptors another try. Cracking into the Intercessor sprue, I picked out a nice reasonable Space Marine to work on. The Intercessor Space Marines are built a little more tactical than the old Tactical Space Marines, so I feel like it'll be a pretty easy conversion. And you know what else is tactical? Today's sponsor, Tacticus. Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus is the fun mobile game that I like to play when I got a little downtime or when I'm feeling that tactical itch. The battles are fun to strategize and play in, and they have almost every faction I could possibly want, with more being added all the time. They have so many to choose from, over 21 now, and out of those 21, there are over 115 different champions from across the universe of Warhammer 40,000. I love that I get to use the units and champions from the factions I collect: Black Templars, Necrons, Orcs, even Death Guard. It's all right there to pick and choose from. Not only that, but there's so many kinds of battles I can take them into: huge PvE campaigns, PvP, guild raids, event battles, and so much more. For the month of February, they're having an all-new event to celebrate the release of the next faction for Tacticus, the Leagues of Votann. They're all about durability, hard-hitting weaponry, precise strategy that goes perfect with Tacticus. February starts off with a bang with an all-new survival event that lets you play with Vin, the Brockheer Ironmaster, early. And then after that will be his official release along with Ulthar the Destined. I can't wait. If any of you guys want to get down and play on the game, you can find it linked in the description below or scan the QR code on screen to get started today. With our rewards code EonsOfBattle, you can get 2,000 gold, 30 blackstone, and 10 shards of Forkas. It's free to play and a great game to play every day. I carved off the Imperialis from the chest, using my hobby knife to hack away large chunks, and then going back over these spots with a sanding twig to get them nice and smooth. After getting the legs and torsos all glued together, I looked for some weapons for this fella. The one-handed bolter feels like a good choice to leave his chest open and visible so I can cover it in pouches later. Before gluing on his bolter, I carefully shaved off the decorative banner from the side. I do wish the kit came with more unbedazzled bolters. I feel like I spend a lot of my time cleaning off this stuff. It's a nice detail, but for most of the time I want to add my own detail. I drilled out the barrel of the bolter, drilling through the middle and then doing another hole through the side ports. I always do this second. A few times I've drilled out the side holes first and my drill bit has bit into the plastic and tore the barrel off the bolter. I held this bolter arm up to my mini and I want him holding it more off to the side. So to make this happen, I clipped and filed the shoulder down a little and glued it on with some super glue. Then for the other arm, I'm thinking knife. I also want this at a different angle, held tight to his chest, like he's surveying the battlefield looking for who he's gonna stab with that knife. I've got the arms on there, but there's some unsightly gaps from the reposing, so I need to fix it. I mixed up some green stuff and shoved it into the gaps. I'm not good at guessing volumes, so I usually just shove a ball in there and then squish it down as good as I can, and then cut off the excess with my hobby knife. Once I had the right amount, I used my silicone sculpting tools to smooth the putty into shape, rubbing it again and again until I was happy with the look. Then I used the point of my knife to press in some ribbing to match the undersuit of my Space Marine. Now to give him some pouches. I want to go with some magazine pouches. I cut off some extra magazines from the banana mag bolters, cutting them at the top of the magazine well. Then I grabbed some more pouches and I wrapped them around his waist. I really want this guy loaded up with pouches. Now for those magazine bits. If I flip them upside down, they do look like little pouches with a magazine sticking out the top of them. Like he has a tactical vest that he can pull fresh magazines out of. It's always a little mysterious where Space Marines keep their extra ammo, but with this guy, we know. I used plastic glue to stick these down so I can poke and prod them into position, and I made them resting just above the rest of his pouches. They are almost perfect. The last little thing is filling in the little hole. I used some Tamiya basic putty on the end of a toothpick to fill in this hole, and now they're perfect. Now I can finish him off with some shoulder pads. I got lucky that the shoulder pad under his bolter just fits. I didn't dry fit it to make sure I was leaving enough room, but it all worked out in the end. And for his other arm, I used a little bit of green stuff to get the shoulder sitting taller so it matched the other shoulder. I glued on a backpack power plant, and for the face, I decided to look through my bits bin for some options. I found these antenna helmets from the Infiltrator Incursor sprue. These look a little bit more techy than the normal Intercessor heads. My little Raptor is looking tactical. There's actually a lot of great bits in the Intercessor box for making Marines look like this. I don't often use them because I leave off the pouches and extra ammo, and I replace them with purity seals and skulls. Different strokes for different folks. The Raptors chapter is a successor to the Raven Guard. A lot of the coolest Space Marines are. The Raven Guard are kinda just good Space Marines. They don't go in for the duty and the honor and the epic deeds. They kinda just get the job done and go home. Which seems ridiculous in the world of Warhammer 40,000. To show this pragmatism, there's a lot of good options in the Intercessor kit, but there's even more tactical cool bits in the Incursors/Infiltrators box. And honestly, the Incursors and Infiltrators are so similar to your bog standard Intercessor, I feel like you can use them pretty interchangeably and your opponent will never notice. The only thing they will notice is that your models look extra cool. On my little Raptor, I've got an Infiltrator helmet, or maybe it's an Incursor helmet, I don't remember the difference, and I think it looks pretty slick. And now this little sucker is in need of a base. I dropped a magnet into a Cobalt Keep 32mm base, and I got to work building up the ground, gluing down some 1/4-inch cork and tearing up the sides with my fingers. Then I added a second tier. I want him with a leg up pose. Right now he's a little off balance, but I can edit the cork using my Dremel to grind down the cork on an angle so he looks much more appropriate standing on top. I glued him down with some ultra thick super glue. Usually I pin my minis, but his feet are so big and firmly planted to the base that I think super glue will be more than enough to keep him on there. Also, ultra thick super glue, available from EonsOfBattle.com. I covered the exposed ground with some European mud texture paste. Eventually I want this base to look like a natural forest floor, but a lot of that texture will come out through the painting. And speaking of painting, I gave my Raptor a black prime. Then I zenithalled him from above with a light gray paint. This will provide my light and shadow, and now for the color. I gave him a big wet coat of algae green speed paint. I really like this color for military green stuff. I put this all over his armor, working quickly so it had time to settle nice and dark in the recesses. Once that was dry, I gave the model dry brushing with olive drab. This highlights the edges and gives him a little bit more contrast. Finally, I took some grotesque green and I did a sponging of this to represent some battle damage, where the paint of his armor has gotten chipped and worn away. And I also used this color to do some edge highlighting on the easiest to reach spots. Now his armor is all done, it's time for the leather, and one of my favorite colors for leather is Darkwood Speed Paint. Not just a great video game, it's also a really nice dark brown color that gives a really nice dark leather over a Zenithal Prime. After that, I took some desert tan paint and I dry brushed this over the leather to add some warmth that didn't exist from just the speed paint. Now for the metal. I grabbed some plate armor, a nice general purpose silver paint, and I put this over his combat knife, his extra magazines, and all the metal guns of his bolter. Then I gave all these metal bits a black wash. With the metal done, he's getting pretty close. Next up, the accent. And for this Marine, I want to use black for his shoulder pads and the armor of his bolter. This will really help show off the symbols and some more color that I want to put on him later. I went back to the light gray I used for the Zenithal. This paint has good coverage, so I can paint a stripe of this over the black shoulder pad, and I also put a stripe of this over the bolter. This was the primer for some color, Fiendish Yellow. It would have taken about 100 coats to paint a stripe of this over black, but over the gray, I got it done in 2 coats with a nice bright finish. And I also put this color over his eye lenses. I think Raptors probably canonically have red lenses because basically all Space Marine lenses are red, but I want to add a little bit more yellow to my guy so that he matches the paint job of my old minis. Space Marines in army green kinda just looks right. If I was putting together an army of Raptors, I feel like the army list kinda writes itself. I would want to see 3 big bricks of regular old Intercessor Space Marines. No, they're not the most survivable thing in the world, but 10 is a lot of them. Things that are pretty good at killing stuff will probably on average kill like 5 Space Marines. But if there's 10 of them there, all of a sudden it becomes a bigger problem. Now you attach lieutenants to those squads, and lieutenants are incredibly cheap at 55 points. They grant lethal hits. 10 Space Marines with bolters are throwing out 40 attacks, and that's a lot of attacks to be getting lethal hits on. And that lieutenant gives fallback, shoot, and charge. An incredible amount of tactical flexibility. You could almost call them tactical Space Marines. Now that would take care of the practicality flavor of the Raptors, but what about the Raven Guardiness? Well, I feel like that could come in with the detachment. There's a newer Space Marine detachment called Orbital Assault Force, and this detachment allows you to pick 3 units and give them the Deep Strike keyword. So all of a sudden you can have random units coming out of nowhere. You could do something like a squad of Infernus Marines or Hellblasters to show up and absolutely barbecue something. You could get silly with it and take a Land Raider full of Terminators and just have it drop out of the sky. Or maybe 3 sneaky squads of Eliminator Snipers showing up to just start taking out some of your opponent's characters. Reading that detachment and thinking about the sheer reasonableness of the Raptors has really got my math hammer brain working overtime. But this little guy needs to get finished. This Raptor needs some decals, and amazingly, Raptors are on the standard Space Marine decal sheet. I clipped out a white Raptor symbol, an assault symbol, and a little Aquila. The Raptors aren't supposed to be too fancy, so I think just a few painted on markings will be enough to show what he's about. I put the assault symbol right over the yellow stripe, which adds a lot of fun detail to this shoulder, and the Raptor symbol went on the other shoulder. Then, similar to the assault marine symbol over the yellow stripe, I threw the Aquila right over the strap on his bolter. Layering these shapes make them look a lot more purposeful, dare I say, reasonable. And you know what is extremely reasonable? EonsOfBattle.com. On our website, we have all kinds of hobby goodies, army painter paints, brushes, wet palettes, basing cork, and speaking of basing cork, we got glue, ultra thick and ultra thin super glue. And we have terrain. It's the best way to support us doing what we do by getting a membership. Each month, members get a credit good for any one terrain pack we've ever made or the brand new one. New in January, we have created the Tomb Library, a set of hyper-advanced structures designed to quickly get a thematic defensive position up and running on the tabletop. The wall sections create an impenetrable fortress as they crackle with energy, floating just above the battlefield, and following just behind are the sarcophagus, ancient tombs of forbidden power with room to display the aliens' captured trophies and macabre exhibits. This terrain was designed by us and is available now at EonsOfBattle.com. I hit the model with a satin varnish and then took some black paint and sponged it over the shoulder pads and decals for some weathering to make them look just as beat up as the rest of his armor. Now my Raptor is done and ready for that base. To start out, I took some more of the European mud texture paste and smeared it over his legs, like he's all messy from trekking through the jungle. Then I gave him a base coat of brownish decay speed paint for that sickly yellow-brown color all over the forest floor. I went through my grass tuft collection and found some plants that matched the complexion of the earth, some bigger and some smaller tufts, and after sticking these down with some thick superglue, I reached for my dirty down moss. This stuff is a green slime that dries with varying shades of green. I put this onto a playing card and I added some water to thin it down, and I splashed this all over the ground and up onto his legs. Once that was dry, I gave a few spots on the base a second coat of undiluted paint to make it greener and more saturated. Then I was left with a forest base with a lot of texture. It really gives some good contrast between the clean round shapes of his armor and the crunchy natural looking floor he's walking on. The only thing left was to hit the rim of the base with some gloss black paint. I feel like the Raptors are a pretty easy and pretty good looking chapter of Space Marines to pull off. Comparing it to my OG guy, I am liking what I'm seeing. I don't think these old models ever won me a single game of Kill Team. Maybe if I brought this sucker. I'm sure that you can't take a Combi Grav in modern Kill Team. It kind of blows my mind that Raptors chapter is one of the Space Marine chapters featured on the standard Space Marine decal sheet. When they were putting this together at Games Workshop HQ, obviously Ultramarines, then Imperial Fists, Salamanders, then what's number 3? I'm sure the room was suggesting like White Scars, Iron Hands, regular Raven Guard. No, Raptors. Games Workshop loves to give Space Marines all kinds of attention, but there's a lot of Space Marines, so most of them don't get anything. It's interesting to see that the little old Raptors get a shout out on the decal sheets. This guy is going to join my ever-growing collection of every Space Marine chapter that has ever existed, and please let me know in the comments below, what other Space Marine chapters should I take a look at? And a big thanks to Tacticus for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to click the link in the description to play today. Thanks for watching.